Before we can even get to Prince Harry, Donald Trump, and the bombshells being dropped across the Atlantic, we have to understand the context. Because what's happening right now isn't just a celebrity spat, it's the international eruption of a crisis that has been silently brewing in the United Kingdom for years. In the ancient, hallowed halls of a nation that gave the world the Magna Carta and the very concept of parliamentary democracy, something deeply unsettling has taken root. A quiet storm has been gathering, one that threatens the most fundamental freedom of all, the right to speak your mind. This isn't a crisis of violence in the streets or political corruption in the halls of power. It's something far more insidious. This is a crisis of speech. In today's Britain, arrests are being made. Lives are being upended, not for theft or assault, but for tweets, for opinions posted online. Regular, everyday citizens, respected journalists, and even celebrated comedy writers are finding themselves on the wrong side of the law for committing the modern-day sin of wrongthink. Take the case of Graham Linehan, a comedy titan, the creative mind behind beloved sitcoms like Father Ted and the IT Crowd, a man who made millions of people laugh. Today, he is a man in exile, a pariah in his own country. His crime? He dared to voice opinions on gender ideology that clashed with the prevailing progressive orthodoxy. He argued for the protection of women's spaces and was effectively canceled, deplatformed, and even found himself in legal trouble, handcuffed and questioned by police over his online commentary. This wasn't hate speech in any traditional sense, it was dissent from a newly enforced consensus. And in the New Britain, dissent is becoming dangerous.
But Linehan is just the most high-profile example. This is happening to ordinary people. Consider the surreal case of Sarah White, a woman whose only crime was hanging a flag outside a public building, a simple, patriotic gesture. No threats, no violence, no offensive language. Yet within moments, she was surrounded, hauled off by police in full view of dozens of stunned onlookers. The footage is chilling. Or the countless others who have received a heavy knock at the door from uniformed officers, sometimes armed, for causing anxiety with a social media post. The chilling reality is that in the UK, the very definition of a hate incident has been warped. It no longer requires evidence or a criminal threshold. It is based entirely on the subjective perception of a supposed victim. If someone, somewhere, feels offended by something you've said online, the police can record it as a non-crime hate incident against your name, a permanent mark on your record that can show up in background checks, all without you ever being charged with a crime. It is a system designed not to prosecute crime, but to chill speech, to make people so afraid of saying the wrong thing that they choose to say nothing at all. And while this was happening, where was the mainstream media? The BBC, ITV, the major newspapers? Largely, they were silent. Stories of these arrests were either ignored completely or framed in a way that justified the police action. The silence from the institutions that are supposed to hold power to account has been deafening. This created a vacuum, a void, where the official story was the only one being told.
But nature and the internet abhors a vacuum. Into this void stepped a new generation of independent voices, citizen journalists, YouTubers, and podcasters on platforms like Elon Musk's X, formerly Twitter, began doing the job the mainstream media refused to do. Journalists like Hannah Kirkpatrick, a former Sky News reporter, began going viral, not with celebrity puff pieces, but with raw, unfiltered videos exposing the biased policing, the slow decay of open dialogue, and the absurdity of the censorship culture. Her content crossed oceans, with terrified American followers messaging her, warning her that she could be arrested just for speaking the truth. Some even telling her to apply for political asylum in the United States. This is the grim reality that has taken hold. To dodge the censors, truth-tellers have been forced to disguise their commentary as comedy. Kirkpatrick herself started a satirical series pretending to be a speech approval call center, simply to highlight the insanity of needing permission to have an opinion. The resistance is growing, but so is the pressure. The country that once championed wit, satire, and fierce debate is slowly becoming a place where those very things are treated as a threat. This is the quiet storm that was raging long before Donald Trump or Ben Shapiro ever uttered a word about it. A nation's fundamental freedoms were being eroded, not with a bang, but with a whisper, a police visit, and a silent media. But the storm wasn't going to stay quiet forever. It was about to travel across the Atlantic, where two of the loudest voices in American politics were waiting to turn the UK's internal crisis into a global firestorm. A storm of censorship can only stay quiet for so long before it makes landfall somewhere else. And when the stories of Britain's free speech crisis finally crossed the Atlantic, they didn't just make ripples, they triggered a political earthquake. The news landed on the desks of two figures who are fundamentally incapable of staying silent, Donald Trump and Ben Shapiro. And they didn't just comment on the situation, they aimed their fire at a single, high-profile target who they see as the living embodiment of the problem, Prince Harry. The first shot was fired by the 45th president himself. Donald Trump, a man who built his entire political brand on defying political correctness, sat down in the Oval Office with British commentator Nigel Farage. When asked about the crackdown on speech in the UK, Trump didn't mince words. In his classic, blunt style, he made it clear what he thought. He called the entire situation bizarre and disturbing, adding, "It's not a good thing." Coming from a world leader, this was a direct shot at the UK government's policies. It was a signal that the problem was no longer just a domestic issue, it was now on the international radar. Trump's words were a signal flare, drawing the world's attention to the slow-burning fire in Britain. But if Donald Trump lit the match, it was Ben Shapiro who poured the gasoline and detonated the explosion. Appearing on Fox News, one of the biggest media platforms on the planet, Shapiro didn't just slam the UK's Orwellian speech laws. He took the fight to a deeply personal level. He unleashed a rhetorical missile aimed directly at the California-based royal. He didn't just criticize Prince Harry, he mockingly, but pointedly, called for his deportation from the United States. Deportation. Let that sink in. Why him? Why Prince Harry? Because in the eyes of critics like Shapiro, Harry is no longer just a British prince. He has become a symbol. He and his wife, Meghan Markle, have positioned themselves as champions of a certain brand of progressive ideology, the very ideology that, in the view of conservatives, is fueling the culture of censorship and silencing dissent. Shapiro's argument was as sharp as it was brutal. How can Prince Harry lecture the world about misinformation and harmful narratives while enjoying the protections of America's First Amendment, a freedom that is being systematically dismantled back in his own home country for people who dare to disagree with his worldview? It was a masterstroke of political theater designed to expose what Shapiro sees as the ultimate hypocrisy, and he didn't stop there. He followed up with a now infamous jab, asking with a smirk, "Do we also deport his balls?" A crude but direct swipe at Meghan Markle, tapping into the widespread narrative that she is the controlling influence in the relationship. The panel on the show howled with laughter, but behind the joke was a raw and palpable frustration. This wasn't just a punchline. It was the voice of a growing movement that sees Harry and Meghan not as victims, but as willing participants in the very woke culture that they believe is eroding Western freedoms. In that single television segment, the game changed. This was no longer just about British law. This was now a full-blown culture war, and Prince Harry, whether he wanted to be or not, had just been made its unwilling poster boy. And this is where the story pivots into a territory of stunning, almost unbelievable irony. While British citizens are getting a knock on the door for a tweet, and comedians are fleeing the country in fear, Prince Harry, the man at the center of this firestorm, has been widely criticized for embracing the very culture of censorship that is now gripping his homeland. This isn't an attack out of nowhere. You have to look at his and Meghan's own words and actions. They have been some of the most vocal critics of what they call misinformation and online hate, the very same buzzwords being used by UK authorities to justify their crackdown on speech that falls outside the accepted narrative. From global stages to their multi-million-dollar Netflix and Spotify deals, a core part of their brand has been about controlling the narrative and calling for a more compassionate internet, which many interpret as a call for a more sanitized and ultimately more censored internet.
Remember, this is a couple who fled the UK, in part because they felt victimized by a free and aggressive press. Yet, from the safety of their Montecito mansion, they have leveraged the power of the American media to tell their own story, completely on their own terms. This creates the exact hypocrisy that commentators like Shapiro and Trump have seized upon. They see a prince who demands freedom for his own speech, while simultaneously appearing to support the ideological framework that is being used to crush the freedom of others. This is precisely why Prince Harry has become the perfect target in this culture war. He is the ultimate scapegoat. He is royalty, he is wealthy, he is a global celebrity, and most importantly, he has become a poster child for the kind of progressive elitism that conservatives feel is completely out of touch with the concerns of ordinary people. When the average person in the UK is worried about being arrested for a joke, Prince Harry is talking about the global pain and suffering caused by online discourse. The disconnect is massive, and it's a gap that his critics are more than happy to exploit. Ben Shapiro's call for deportation, while satirical, was a brilliantly cynical political question. It was asking, why does a man who seems to support the principles of speech suppression get to enjoy the protections of a country that still fiercely defends it? Why should he be given a platform in America to champion ideas that are leading to the arrest of his own countrymen back home? It's a raw, uncomfortable question, but it's one that resonates deeply with a growing number of people who feel the walls of acceptable opinion closing in on them. So when Trump and Shapiro lash out at Prince Harry, they're not just attacking a man, they are attacking an idea. Prince Harry has become more than a person. He's become a symbol. He represents, to them, the disconnect between the global elite who preach one set of rules from their protected platforms and the ordinary citizens who have to live with the consequences of those rules on the ground. The outrage isn't just about a celebrity. It's about what he has come to represent in the war for the future of free speech itself.
So, what started as a quiet storm in the UK has officially exploded into a global culture war. Prince Harry, whether he likes it or not, is now at the epicenter of a fierce debate about the very future of free speech. The battle lines have been drawn, with titans like Trump and Shapiro on one side and the progressive establishment on the other. So I have to ask you, is Prince Harry a victim in all of this, or a symbol of the very censorship culture his critics are fighting against? Drop your unfiltered thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to stay on top of the most explosive celebrity and political clashes, smash that subscribe button for Behind Glam and hit the bell so you never miss another story. Thanks for watching.